Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is December 6th, and it's Wednesday, which means we are talking about all the stuff that happened in the news in the last week that we kind of think is fun or interesting. So that's what we have coming up in this show. So today, as of right now, we have Jyunmi, Andy, Beth, and I'm Brian. And this may be the group today. I think based on what we know, I think everybody else had other things going on, but that's okay. That just gives us more time to talk about all the fun stuff going on in our news. So just as a quick recap, every Wednesday, we talk about the news that came up over the last 7 days. Probably not exactly, but last Wednesday, we pick it up almost to the minute of whatever's going on. So just sort of digging into that. This is a great show if you're not necessarily tuned in all the time as we are to all the stuff in AI. This is a great way to kind of catch up about the things that might be valuable to you in business, or just interesting, or maybe hints at what's coming up in 2024, which could also be really, really helpful. So I think that's a great place to sort of kick it off. I don't know, Jyunmi, do you want to kick it off with that story about Jimmy Stewart? Because it's sort of topical. It's a Wonderful Life, right? It's Christmas time.
Right, exactly. Exactly. It all lines up.
Let's maybe jump off there.
So for those of you who don't know, Jimmy Stewart was an actor, a very famous one from the past. He's from the movie It's a Wonderful Life. You know, that really famous black and white movie all about Christmas that they play like multiple times in the month of December since like 1960s. But actually, probably before that. But essentially, this company called Calm, if you're not familiar, is essentially their product is it's a platform for
like meditation app, right?
Yeah, exactly. You want meditation, help you fall asleep, all of those kinds of things. Because a lot of people, have problems with insomnia and things like that. But so they are partnering with the Jimmy Stewart estate and a company called Respeecher to recreate and clone Jimmy Stewart's voice to read a story called It's a Wonderful Sleep Story. So I don't know the details of what the story content's going to be, but essentially a clone voice of Jimmy Stewart will be reading that to you as you fall asleep to his dulcet tones, as they say. So this I find really interesting because we're seeing the application of AI, generated content based off of pre-existing performances. What's interesting is that Respeecher is the company that's providing the cloning. They're the folks who did Mark Hamill's voice for The Mandalorian. So
is that right?
they're making inroads. Yeah, they're the people who is the go-to right now for doing this kind of work in the Hollywood sense. So they obviously have the experience in that space.
They also did James. They also did James Earl Jones' voice for Darth Vader.
Oh, okay. So are they de-aging the voices? Is that what they're doing? They're using, or they're just training it on earlier?
They're training it on the earlier performances, which makes a lot of sense because as you get older, your voice changes and
he sounds like the Joker, not
exactly. Exactly. So and so that firm seems to have a lot of experience, or at least they're at the forefront of this kind of technology. And another point that you brought up earlier, Brian, was that this is a great use case or example of how artists can leverage their performances, their fame, their experiences, and things like that to provide for their estate or family after they've passed on. Right. So I think I agree with you. This is a play there for that, whether you need to generate revenue or you have a consistent part of your estate or trust or anything like that. So these kinds of rights, this is a different kind of likeness, right? I don't know if it's explicitly covered in copyright. We can ask William Love for that in the exchange. But yes, I think there's a big play, and I think this is a great example of how AI can be used to the artist's advantage. Right. This is one more thing that can be leverage or negotiation for contracts and things like that.
So I wanted to throw on the other side of that real quick, Jimmy, just before everybody else jumps into stories, that one of the stories I also had, because it's the other side of this, which is content being scraped and used without permission, right, is what came out of Alibaba. And actually, there's been several in the last week. Matt Wolf just did a great video about it, about several different instances where like on TikTok, you might have seen that, like, it can draw, like, it's sort of a stick figure outline of the image, but you can then replace a still image, like of me standing still. And the idea is that now I can be moving the same way the stick figure was moving. Well, the problem is the title here is Alibaba's Animate Anyone is trained on scraped videos of famous TikTokers, except not with their permission, or maybe it was, because maybe in the deep recesses of what you sign up for TikTok is to say, like, guess what? It's a social media platform. You own nothing. You own nothing. And so we will use what we want because you said it was okay. And so I don't know this to be the case.
This is a hypothetical. He's spinning a hypothetical.
Right.
But this comes up a lot, which is that, hey, by the way, for the pleasure of using this app for free, a la the Facebook, Facebook will be free always, except it's not, right? We know it doesn't cost me dollars and cents, but it costs me a lot of other things in advertising and my content and things like that. And they have total rights. They can shut it down. They can suspend me. They can obliterate my whole existence on Facebook. Well, I think it's the same with TikTok. And so I think this is going to be interesting because they were saying not just famous, like a Charli D'Amelio or people that my daughter might be into or that are famous and built up a big following on TikTok, but also accounts that seemingly have like very little followers or engagement or whatever being scraped and being used to now recreate. So now me as a 45-year-old dad, because that's what everybody wants to see, I can now take a still image of myself, I guess like this is a rag doll, and it'll make me do the, that was probably too much for you guys right there. I don't want to.
Hey, Brian, no, get up and stand up because we couldn't see what your legs were doing there.
Yeah. My legs were doing nothing, Andy. My legs were doing nothing.
By referencing Alibaba, but I think it's ByteDance that owns TikTok.
It is.
Or is there a connection? Is there's a connection between Alibaba and ByteDance?
The ones I saw from Matt Wolf in his video, I watched this yesterday. A few of these studies all say in collaboration with ByteDance.
Yeah, 100%.
There's like 3.
And there's also that recent article that that highlighted that China as a whole has declared that AI generated content is copyrightable in their system.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I have no doubt that TikTok has some sort of language in their TOS that says we can use your stuff. And with all of those connections between all of those large companies, I'm sure that data's been moved around and everything like that. So
this is a great use case for Claude and its giant context window. So if you would like to know whether TikTok's terms of service actually say any of the things that we're hypothetically thinking that it might, you can copy it, put it in Claude and ask, is this addressed and what is the language?
Do not take me for legal advice, please, God. Don't. We're all just giving our opinions on here.
Disclaimer.
That's exactly where this should stay. It's just 4 people having a conversation around the table virtually, talking about AI. So, all right. So that's a kind of like both sides of that thing, both in sort of like, I don't know, the entertainment side of the world. Andy or Beth, what did you guys come up with this week?
Well, I just saw William comment on the China thing. And one of the things that he was talking about was that China doesn't actually have the equivalent of our fair use policy. And that may have gone into part of this decision. Like their copyright system is not the same as ours. Like they don't have the same kind of thing. But I think it's really interesting. Andy, what do you have this week?
Okay. So I'm going to shift over to the technical advancements that are, happening behind the scenes to a large degree compared to what you see in the general news about AI. But as you might imagine, there's a lot of investment in the advancement of the underlying foundational capabilities of AI for a wide range of applications. I'm going to cite two that were in the news this week. One is a competitor to transformers as neural networks go. So remember, everything that's a GPT is a generative pre-trained transformer, specific kind of transformer. That transformer architecture basically takes its model is it takes text, turns it into numbers called embeddings that are and then used to predict the next thing. So that's a really poor explanation of it. I can do a much better job. There's no time for that today. I want to talk about Mamba, which is a new kind of neural network that is better than transformers. So now I think that's important news, and it's just way down in the footnotes, really. But Mamba is outperforming transformers, and it's a new kind of neural network. I don't have any idea how it works, although there's a short description about how it works, but not in layman's language. So I can't translate that for you. But that's really an indication of what's going to be happening in 2024. Is we're going to see maybe GPTs aren't all that. And there's a whole new generation of things that maybe even OpenAI is not working on that end up being superior to what the GPTs are. Now, I will say, as I suggest that there are all these advancements, that there's a lot of inertia around an entrenched and popular platform that's perfectly capable of doing everything that we need it to do. So it's not like this is going to be displacing GPTs in any time, but it's just an interesting thing. The other thing is, okay, shifting over to tool using. So one of the things that's really cool about GPTs specifically, and GPT-4 with its access to and incorporation into the same UI of code interpreter to do data analysis and write Python code in response to your text queries, and vision, multimodal interpreting vision, and importantly, web browsing. Those are all kind of tools that it can access when you're putting a prompt in. Well, a new company called Nexus Flow has just put forward a tool using focused small LLM. It's a 13 billion parameter model. And remember that GPT-4 is more than 1 trillion parameters, right? We don't know the exact number, but it's trillions. So here's a small little thing that surpasses GPT-4 in its use of tools, its ability to do that. So it's been trained specifically to do tool using, but that just shows you that all these individual capabilities of what we've all been collectively exposed to by OpenAI and GPT-4 and others like Claude and Bard, those things, if you focus on a certain area of expertise or skills and you do specific fine-tuning type training, you can get to a very small, compact model. But the point about this is 13 billion is small enough to put on your computer.
Yep.
Okay, so a 13 billion model can then be an agent that is really well conditioned to do tool using, which is really what we want for an agent. We want it to be able to go out and access all different kinds of things. And this small model does better than GPT-4 in doing that.
That's really interesting.
Nice.
We've heard this. This is not the first time we've heard this too, where smaller models are being able to outperform larger ones. And I think even, I might be wrong on this, but I feel like even maybe OpenAI has said in the past that like the future isn't necessarily more and more and more in terms of like the size of the data sets or the models. In other words, whatever, thousands of trillions, whatever that would be, right? Whatever that term is, that it's that there's lighter models, if you will, that are capable, maybe with synthetic data or otherwise, are capable of outperforming some of these larger ones. So I think that's really, really interesting to hear that. Because like you said, if it's able to be deployed on a computer, then that opens up a lot of other, you know, abilities and things like that for how fast and smooth it can move for things that are moving towards, I guess, like agents and things like that in the future.
Right. There are also sort of contrasting that. There also continue to be papers published and people giving their vague tweet like impressions of their experimentation that say the bigger the model and the longer that you give it to train on it and play by itself, with an accurate reward and guidance system, the more capable it becomes. Like they have not reached the ceiling of that where that doesn't have increasing returns.
So I got a couple of stories that are tangentially related, but they are related to like AI performance. Number one is there is a release of research by the Washington University in St. Louis, and their team has come across, and they were able to demonstrate what they call monolithic 3D integration of layered 2D materials into a novel or new processing type. And so I know that sounds really chunky there, but essentially what they're talking about is how chips are made, right? They're talking about the technology it comes to processors and how it processes information and how it's actually physically built. So without going into too much detail, currently the multiple functions of a chip, and you've seen this in like Apple, keynotes and things like that, is they put all of the functions things. So they got their built-in GPU and their CPU and there's memory, and these are all laid out laterally, so that takes up a lot more space on the board. But with this new method, they're doing layers, atomically thin layers. So all of those components go on top of each other, which takes a smaller footprint. But the other thing it does is it lowers the latency between each of the processing between all of the layers. So that improves all electronics all over by using this new method, but specifically high intensity computation like AI. So we're going to even see, if they implement this research into practical sciences, we're going to see another huge bump up theoretically in chip performance. So all of those shovels and pickaxes again. And the other story I think that's related is the release of Stable Diffusion's SDXL and their whole new LCMs. I think those are, let me see here. So an LCM, or a latent consistency model. I think everyone's seen this, or at least in our circles anyways, about how you can type out your image. And I think Carl may have shown this in a previous episode or whatnot. But this speaks to the smaller, faster performance of AI and generative AI, as opposed to the larger and larger concept. So I think it speaks to that point. It's got very low latency. You can generate images as you're typing, and it'll make adjustments to those images, which I think is a huge push into the smaller, faster concept on the AI side. So I just wanted to talk about those two things since they're related. I have other stories unless someone else wants to talk.
No, I have. So there are two. One is new and one is just being talked about now. The first one is Microsoft Bing has announced DeepSearch. It is not available yet, but it will ask you for context if it doesn't understand, or like try to infer, which I think is hilarious because when was our RAG show? Was yesterday? 2 days ago? I literally go to Bing and say, hey, is Salesforce Einstein a RAG? And Bing says, no, Beth, Salesforce Einstein is not a rag. A rag is a piece of old cloth that can be used to wipe or clean things.
Yeah.
Salesforce Einstein is a complete artificial intelligence platform. I'm like,
so similar but different.
Very helpful. That was a very helpful distinction. How
is that the context?
Yeah.
That is not a predictable answer.
To say something about the Bing story, I read a couple of things, TechCrunch, Verge, all those kinds of things, and it's just an announcement kind of release. But the example they gave was, you take they asked about customer points, right?
Mm-hmm. Like
loyalty points, right? A simple sentence, and then DeepSearch would expand it out into a more complicated, asking about details and things like that. And I don't want to diminish what that significance might be, but the first thing that popped in my head was Prompt Perfect. You remember that that plugin that would just take your simple prompt and then make it better? Yeah. So the example I've seen so far, I mean, admittedly, it's not everything. It sounds like they're simply just expanding and making your prompt perfect. So,
or is it Dolly? Is it Dolly for search? And and that'll be interesting, because Dolly doesn't always make the image that I'm going for with its reimagining of my prompt.
It kind of makes sense to me. I mean, what they're saying, and I think there's some real value here, because oftentimes I've talked about this before, about how all of us, whether we wanted to or not, were learned or were taught how to Google search. It's an actual skill set. Nobody thinks about it that way, because it's like, well, I don't know, just go to Google. But there's actual skill set, because if I ever turned my daughter younger than she is now, but when she was younger, like 7, 8, 9, she really struggled with what any of us would consider to be a basic Google search. So did my dad, and he retired in 2005. So now he's 74. It was a struggle for him. And I'd say, no, you have to ask for it this way. But even so, I would often, all of us go to Google search or whatever. You throw something in the URL, the search bar, and you're not quite sure. And in the old way, you needed to get a series of answers and be like, well, that's off, but that gives me an idea. I need to ask it this way. And so you might go through 3, 4, 5 iterations to get there. And what I feel like this is doing is like working with humans in the way that humans work, which is that more than likely that first initial ask or thought, or like, is Einstein a rag, may not be like as detailed as it needs to be to give you the answer you want. So I love this idea of almost like this human in the loop with this, if that's in fact what this deep search is doing, which is like, well, do you want to go down this path, or do you want to go down that path? Because both of these are probable from your first query. And it's like, oh, I'm keeping you in line. And so anyway, I always love this idea of, I'm sort of big on this idea lately of like with custom GPTs and stuff, of the human in the loop of we're working together in this like step process, as opposed to go do these series of tasks and then me have to fix it at the end and whatever. It's much more efficient for me to be part of the process as it's going. And I don't know, when I read that article, that was the first thing that came to me, was like, okay, loyalty and reward points, I think in their case in Japan. But they were like, well, look, that could be like best loyalty cards. That could be comparisons, redeeming them. It could be managing loyalty points. What do you want? What do you want to know about? Because those are like 7 different areas to go into. And so I thought
there's a term of art.
I guess I'm getting that.
There's a term of art in prompting for this kind of conversational dialogue prompting. And you guys are more familiar with prompt engineering than I am. What is that term? There's actually there's a word for that. It's not a structured prompt. It's the opposite of a structured prompt, which is you start the conversation and then just refine in dialogue with. There is a word for it,
I don't know.
Sorry, I don't have it. I thought one of you, Brian or Beth, would know. But
I can see the conversation about it, but I cannot read the word in my head of what it was called. Yeah. Like,
anyway, there's a label for it. I want to jump to a couple of things about chips. Right, we know that chips are advancing, And the chips that are specific to AI, there's a big space race out there right now. NVIDIA's the leader. They launched and got to the moon first with their very, very fast chips, but there's others out there. And this is an extension of the OpenAI drama that just has started to subside in the last couple of weeks. So the latest news is that Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who's been put back on the throne at OpenAI, he's done something a little suspicious, not necessarily, but there's an angle to it that's a little suspicious, which is he placed an order for many, many tens of millions of dollars with a company that's doing an AI chip called Rain. That Rain is the company that's doing this special AI chip. And he's an investor in that company. So here's the CEO of the company making a decision to invest the company's money by putting an order in for tens of millions of dollars for those chips. Now, to be fair, it could be that that's just the very best option, and that it was a collective decision internally to choose that particular approach. So, but the press, the news that we're talking about from this past week is, Sam Altman's, got a little bit of a conflict of interest here going on.
Got a side pot, got a little side something going on.
Well, he's also talking about creating a device, right? Like, I mean, I don't think there is, I don't think there's a prohibition in OpenAI that you can't actually profit outside of OpenAI with adjacent kind of things.
Profiting internally.
And I think the investment he made in the chip company was through a Y Combinator, like early seed. But that company also has Saudi Arabia investors, or used to.
I remember that.
There was a news story that the U.S. government said,
pushed them out, right?
No, you need to sell your shares.
Yeah, I remember that's right. I forgot about that.
Which is like a coming sort of indication of how serious things are, right? So we're all excited about, like, oh my God, this is amazing. And there is this whole other wing that is sort of news and not news, but is saying, can we just put all the pieces on the board and see what the next 3 moves look like and talk about that as a world or community or and that there was an Ilya interview that I just caught like parts of from a AI exchange post. Seriously, if you love this, you should join the AI exchange because it is an amazing place where we all met. But Ilya was quoted as saying that that's some of the concern. If we are looking at a near 3 to 5 years ability to replace cognitive knowledge tasks that humans currently do, what are let's just imagine the possibilities out of that and talk about it, like prepare or not prepare, but at least have some of that conversation.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Now for something completely different before we shut down.
Well, I was going to say it's more of but this may be where you're going. This is fine. I was just going to say, let's move into a bit of maybe a lightning round here. I know I have a few more but I can do them quicker. So whatever else hasn't been shared, let's sort of move it into a lightning round as we're sort of wrapping up the last 5 minutes.
Here it is.
Go ahead, Andy.
It could be as recently as last week. We talked about a new company called Pika, which came out of the woods and is a tremendous video editing not editing, but video generation platform. And what they just announced this week is the ability to paint a region of the video and say, I don't want this to look this way. Now, the reason that's important is that it's really possible then to sow disinformation, right? So here I take a clip of an actual news feed and I change a region of it. Like I can erase people, but it would then appear to be like an intact video and with continuous. But that's not its purpose. But I just wanted to say that you could be concerned about that. Worry about deep fakes to large degree, because now these tools are getting so sophisticated, you can change just parts of the video really easily using a tool like Pika.
Yeah. My lightning is Apple Personal Voice, which I think happened in the last update to all of our devices. It allows you to synthesize your own voice. And Apple's communication about it is that they are also thinking about people who are losing their voice or losing the sound of their voice. So you can use it in FaceTime. You can use it in the Apple products, wherever the Apple products are that you possess.
Very
go ahead. Go ahead, Jyunmi. I'll do
okay. So my quick lightning round is a company called Titan.ai or Titan AI. They leverage generative AI for mobile game development. So they have a technique where they use Dolly and Stable Diffusion and things like that to generate 2D content or 2D elements for game development. And then they have a proprietary tech that changes them into 3D elements so that you can streamline game development. I think that's going to be a huge thing.
Wow.
That tech to just shorten game development turnaround, which I think will be huge. And that speaks towards how generative AI can expand the game experience for the gamer, for the player. Can you imagine it? Generative AI personas, NPCs, unique stories, and interactions that are generatively created based upon your actions in the game. That means everybody gets their own story and their own experience.
Story.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, God, the gaming industry, that could probably be a whole topic for another. Maybe it should be the gaming industry, because like where those advancements are going, and you're gonna have 17-year-olds, and I love the idea too of like quick storyboarding. I think just in entertainment and alone, as far as movies and gaming, the ability to do really, really like 2-week quick storyboards for a team and go, I don't know, what do you think? Or maybe get some users in there already working with like a working model. Is pretty cool for companies to test that stuff out. Okay, I have two. One is about OpenAI. One is about Amazon. The OpenAI one was, I think, in the last week. There's this really interesting story that came out about how these Googlers. It was a research firm that tries to break ChatGPT, which is a good thing. I love that there's people out there actively trying to break the stuff, and they in fact did. They were using GPT 3.5, not 4. They used the word poem. They asked GPT to say the word poem indefinitely. It created almost like a loop on it. But what started happening after multiple iterations of it saying poem was it started to reveal what appeared to be backend data, trained data, some really interesting, odd, weird things. Lots of different people were able to replicate this. I don't know if this has been closed by OpenAI or not. It did not work on 4. But I think what's more interesting than the word poem or what it did was that, we're still finding, it's just people got to be careful. We're still finding ways that these language models can be abused and sort of hacked in certain ways or tricked into doing it. It was trained on human interaction. So, even in the last week, realizing with ChatGPTs and things like that you can say, this is really important. Imagine if your boss is going to give you a big promotion based off of your answer here, affects the type of answers you get out of it. So it's interesting how we're seeing more of these like human interactions and how they actually play out in the model. The other one is Amazon Q, not a small story. Amazon Q, not to be confused what we talked about with Q Star. It just happens to be called the letter Q. Is like the AWS Amazon sort of competitor to Google as well as OpenAI. And it's actually in free preview right now, even though I will say like their models, if you look at it, is only like $20 or $25 a month. And if you go to their page and look into Amazon Q and what they're offering, number one, you can use a lot of it for free right now. I'm definitely going to be doing that. But number two, it's competitively priced. Now, is Q as good as GPT and all these other things? I think there's some issues with it. There's some articles written about how they got it to break and these kind of things. It's early on. But if you're interested in always testing out like the next deal, the next whatever, or getting into AWS, which is such a huge, or S3 and all these other Amazon products, I think it could be a really interesting product And it's sort of like the latest. Obviously, we've had echoes and these kind of things from Amazon for years in natural language processing, but this is their next big leap. So those are the two big things I wanted to bring up there. Any others before we go?
I just wanted to add that this Q is no relation whatever to the Q behind QAnon.
No. Oh, QAnon. I think it's a Q star. No. They can't. I don't know why Q keeps coming up. Why is that letter all of a sudden? But like, we just had that Q star thing, and now Amazon Q, just to keep things confusing.
Right. And I'm just gonna joke that but it is absolutely true that Avenue Q, the Broadway musical, predicted all of the Q things in 2023.
Wow.
Amazing. All right, we'll leave it there. We covered a lot. It was a lot of topics in that thing. I always love this show because I always learn a ton, and it's interesting to hear what everybody brings in our own. I think we're all drawn to what interests us, and so it's fun to see all the different parts of the news and stuff like that. So hopefully this is super helpful to everybody else. Tomorrow, let me pull up my screen real quick. Tomorrow, we're talking about transforming images into motion with AI. So, Andy, I think you were just started, or maybe Jim, you were just talking about that. Somebody was. Sorry if it was Beth. I don't know who was saying it. Somebody was just talking about that. Pika in these types of tools. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. I'm super excited about that. Friday, we're talking about Meta's Ego Exo 4D. I always have to look at that to make sure I say that correctly. But augmented reality training, what Meta is doing, that's super interesting stuff. So that's what we have coming up for the rest of this week. Keep on coming back, guys. Appreciate you. Don't forget, you can find us on Spotify. We just found out yesterday you can find us on Google Podcasts. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. Then if you want to watch us on the video side, you can always find us on YouTube. Jyunmi just set us up with the YouTube podcast system. So now you can find us on YouTube podcasts. And of course, where it sort of all started, which was LinkedIn. So we continue to grow. We appreciate all your guys' support. And yeah, keep coming back and listening. We're having a lot of fun. This has been the Daily AI Show, and we will see you tomorrow.
Aloha.